ReviewTyme is the home for all things theme parks. Stay up to date with our videos by subscribing and tapping the bell icon. I'm sure we all know by now that Disney's California Adventure upon opening in 2001 was a disaster. Opening with only a handful of rides, lackluster theming, and 26 food and beverage locations. Yeah, there were essentially 5 times as many food locations as major rides. Thankfully, stepping foot in the park today, most of the opening day teething issues have been sorted out, thanks in part to an over $1.1 billion overhaul between 2007 and 2012, which saw some great new attractions, new cohesive themed areas, and one of the greatest lands ever created at Imagineering, Cars Land. However, this wasn't the original vehicle-based land designed for the park, and not even the first based around Route 66. For ReviewTyme, I'm Luke, and this is the history of Cars Land, the land that saved DCA. On the 8th of February 2001, Disney California Adventure opened to disappointing crowds and scathing reviews. Guests expecting the immersive themed lands and stunning attractions of Disneyland were greeted with garish theming, trying to emulate places mere miles down the road. Essentially 3 rides, one of which was so bad it was closed within a year, and an atmosphere that was so un-Disney. Guests immediately voted with their wallets, and within the first year of opening, only 5 million guests walked through the California postcard entry of the park, less than half of the 12 million who stepped foot in Disneyland in the same time. An already disappointing number which worsened in the park's second year of operation, dropping by a further 15%. Management and Imagineering knew that something needed to be done, and quickly, before the public opinion of the park got any worse. They quickly tried some band-aid methods of improving the park with a mix of family-friendly, off-the-shelf flat rides in Bugs Land and the big e-ticket attraction of the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror. Whilst these additions were relatively well received, Imagineering knew that something bigger would be required to fix the park, and the leading plan at the time was for the remains of the Timon parking lot to become home to a brand new land, dedicated to California's 1950s and 60s car culture. A Cars Land, but not Cars Land. The original plans called for a land simply called Car Land, which would celebrate the Mother Road of America, Route 66. As guests would visit an imagined roadside town brought to life with all of the tourist traps, diners, and kitschy souvenirs you would expect, guests would see themselves walking down Cruise Street with the neon glow of the 1960s, teleporting guests back in time to the golden age of California's Sunday drives. Whilst DCA at the time already had a small Route 66 themed area as part of Paradise Pier, it was just a collection of tacky stores, restaurants, and the incredibly forgettable coaster, Mulholland Madness. The land in its final form would have contained at least 2 attractions. The first, and originally only ride planned for the land, was Road Trip USA, an Autopia-style ride in which guests would have driven themselves through large, cartoonified versions of classic American roadside attractions. After entering through a classic Route 66 souvenir shop facade, you would jump in a vehicle and drive along whilst rocking out to the classic road trip hits from bands such as the Beach Boys. One of the big wow moments of the attraction was to be a drive through the Car Land caverns. Buried away in the rockwork waiting to be discovered was glistening caverns filled with cascading waterfalls and shimmering gems. A nice throwback to the iconic Rainbow Caverns from the classic Mine Train Through Nature's Wonderland, which called Disneyland home until 1977. One other smaller attraction planned for the land was Junkyard Jamboree, where guests would have been treated to a musical performance by old junker cars that sprang to life, forming the band Johnny V8 and the Revtones. However, as the development of the land moved forward, Imagineers realized that to truly save Disney's California adventure, the land would need to feature a big e-ticket attraction that would serve as both the land's and the park's big headline ride. This would see Road Trip USA shortened and giving a character tie-in of Goofy about road trips tied to 1995's A Goofy Movie, and a new groundbreaking e-ticket attraction would take center place in Carland, using the test track technology from Epcot and Disney Sea to take guests speeding around the California desert. However, in 2006, a film would release that would completely change the plans Imagineers had for the Timon parking lot. Carland would become Carsland, making close to $500 million at the box office and over $10 billion more in merchandising in the 5 years following the launch of the film. Cars was a success, telling the story of a quiet Route 66 town when a big, hotshot city race car arrives. Immediately, the plans for Carland looked out of date. A better idea had come along. Rather than a land based around Route 66 that would still have the same garishly hip theming problems of early DCA, Cars provided a way for the land to feel more realistic and grounded in reality, even though it would be inhabited by anthropomorphic cars. Carland would slowly see more and more of its original plans infused with the characters and locations of Radiator Springs. Goofy About Road Trips was to become Sally's Road Rally, where you would drive around familiar locations of Radiator Springs. Marty's Drive-In would become Flo's V8 Cafe, and the unnamed slot car ride would become Radiator Springs Races, until ultimately, Carland was no longer simply a land that had some Cars characters in it. It would become Carsland, Disney's first ever single IP theme park land. On October 17, 2007, Disney announced huge changes to revitalize Disney California Adventure, which was at the time called by Disney CEO Bob Iger as a brand withdrawal. The new DCA would see lands become truly immersive in the style of Disneyland, a brand new entrance street with Buena Vista Street, and the town of Radiator Springs would come to life in Carsland. After close to 5 years of construction, Carsland would be the icing on the cake for the massive DCA 2.0 project. Opening up on the 15th of June 2012, instantly anyone worried about basing an entire land off a lukewarm received Pixar movie was silenced. The land truly feels real and alive. You can visit Sarge's Surplus Hut, dine in at Flo's V8 Cafe, and stand in awe at the Ornament Valley. One of Imagineering's most impressive feats of immersive theming ever constructed. Featuring over 300,000 square feet of rockwork, it truly is awe-inspiring standing in the land, looking around and being dwarfed by this man-made mountain range. Of course, the land was much more than just immaculately themed. It contained 3 brand new rides for guests to enjoy, including 2 smaller flat rides with Mater's Junkyard Jamboree, a new version of the classic Whip amusement ride, as well as Luigi's Flying Tires, a newly updated version of the Disneyland Flying Saucers that sadly failed just as Disneyland's had done 50 years earlier. However, the true anchor ride for the land, and now arguably the park, is Radiator Springs Races, the ride the slot car ride system seemed ultimately designed for. Radiator Springs Races is the perfect mix of a dark ride and a thrill ride, taking you through the sights and characters of Radiator Springs first, before a high-octane finale, in which you race another car of guests, never quite sure of who is going to win. Radiator Springs Races is a marvel in modern theme park design, and could be featured in its own episode of Innovations in the future, so watch this space. Carsland was the perfect addition to top off the overall great enhancements to the park that made up DCA 2.0. Apart from flying tires, which was replaced after only a few years by Luigi's Rollicking Roadsters, the land was an overall amazing success, being a great catalyst in the incredible attendance increase DCA has had since opening, seeing around double the numbers of guests every year now, as it did in the first few years after it opened. Every year I seem to hear rumours of Cars Land coming to different parks around the world, from Hong Kong to Paris and seemingly everywhere in between. But still, to this day, if you want to step foot inside Radiator Springs and race around Ornament Valley, the only place to do so is at Disney California Adventure, now finally a fitting second gate for Disneyland. For Review Time, I'm Luke. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing.